My guest today is Kali Dayton. Kali Dayton is a mother of 4, and also she is having to take care of one of her children that has a rare disease. She is also a critical care nurse practitioner, host of the Walking Home from the ICU and Walking You Through the ICU podcast. And she's also a critical care outcomes consultant. She is dedicated to creating awake and walking intensive care units, ICUs, by ensuring ICU sedation and mobility practices are aligned with current research. She works with ICU teams in the US and internationally to transform patients' outcomes through early mobility and management of delirium in the ICU. Let's meet Kali. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the Gaby U show. So today I have an amazing guest, Kali Dayton. And Kali Dayton, welcome to the Gaby U show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes. So, girl, we are going to get into the Gaby U icebreaker question, okay? This is only Gaby U that do this. So the first thing I want to ask you, Kali, is what is your favorite food?
Sometimes it depends on the day. I have a really hard time with favorites because it's so contextual, right? So sometimes I just really want a really good smoothie. Sometimes I want a really, really good pizza. It totally depends on the day. Is that terrible? Is that a bad
Well, it depends on the day and the mood, right?
Yep. The pregnancy, it's just
Yeah, so depending on that, you pick which kind of texture you want,
Yep.
Yeah, for me too, I could be like that too, like, depending on what's going on. And I know many of us are like that, this kind of how you can tell somebody that is a foodie. It's like, I want to try this,
Yep.
Mediterranean
it's a safe bet for me. Mediterranean in general.
So you're not a picky girl, I would say.
No.
Yeah, I could tell.
My life does not allow me to be picky. Are you joking me?
Yeah, I could tell when some of my guests that come, I could tell if they are picky or not. Some of them, they just kind of just pinpoint on one thing like that. Yeah. But when somebody say, oh, I don't know, let's see, I kind of already tell that they are not picky.
I have to roll with it. I have to roll with everything. So
awesome. All right. So the next thing I want to ask you, Kali, is what is your favorite quotes? I know we have so many quotes, but there is one particular one that we usually like kind of hang on, So what would you say that one is?
Something that has I can't, this quote is not because I've mastered it, it's because I want to master it.
Okay.
It's mystified me my whole life. It's from the Bible, and Paul says, I have learned in whatever state I am, therewith to be content. And to me, that's just kind of my guiding star, because I'm very ambitious. I have a lot of visions. I really want to make change.
Are you talking about?
I know, right? I know your type, right? But then sometimes that makes it hard to be happy and grateful and content in that moment. And so coming from Paul, an apostle of God, to say he's on this huge calling, he's got a lot of work to do, but he's also learned to be content. I don't get it, but I want to. So I love that quote, because I feel like, to me, that's like almost like a commandment to stop, enjoy the moment, be content. But that's not the same as complacent. But subconsciously, I interpreted it as the same. So for me, that's one of my favorite quotes, is to don't forget to enjoy life and have joy.
Yes. Oh my goodness. Yeah. And that's, that verse, I mean, I know there are many ways to put it around, which you kind of have, to look at it, a lot of times we are complaining about stuff like, I don't have this, I don't have that. But again, it's like, you don't have this, but we need to look at what you have.
Yep.
We forget at what we have. And sometimes if we look, like some things we're complaining about. Some people want this thing you are saying, what you have, and it's that game of comparison too that makes us sometimes not being content with what we have. We don't realize it and see how we have been able to navigate life to even where we are. Like, oh my, so sometimes you just have to stop and think, like, wait a minute.
Especially, I feel like in the throes of motherhood, when your kids are little, and it's insane. Like a couple of weeks ago, I had someone over sharpening my Cutco knives, right? And my kids were absolutely insane. They get so excited for someone new to come over. I have 4 kids, 5 and under. So it was just wild, right? And I'm apologizing, like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. This is, it's just complete chaos. And she looked at me and she said, I have been praying for this in my own life for years. Don't even apologize. And it was just a very humbling moment, it just shifted the perspective, and I just saw it in a different light. I'm like, nope, absolutely. I'm so grateful to have this complete chaos going on.
Yes, because the time is gonna pass when you these kids are all gonna be grown, left the house. You feel like, I want chaos.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine right now. And not that I
Yeah,
even
it's
wish for
hard
it, but
when you're in that moment. And this is just reminds me of what somebody was talking about, that, is that thing of enjoying what phases your kids are. It's like, oh, I can't wait for them to start crawling. And then they start crawling. Like, I can't wait for them to start walking. And when they start walking, I can't wait for them to go to preschool. So I don't know all this, it's like, can't wait, can't wait. Like,
yeah.
look, just enjoy those moments, because sometimes, I miss all those damn moments, because, and is that enjoying the moments for me. I have my kids, they're all in different milestones. And my little one, I see the way, he needs me so much. He comes, hug me, hold me. Like my oldest, who is almost 21, like, she got no time for that. She got her own thing she's doing, her business at school. Like, but
Yes. And trying to savor every drop, but that time just feels like almost like water that you're trying to hold in your hands. And you can't control it. It's just fleeting. And
yeah.
that's a little bit painful too. So
So it's
there's
like,
just,
what, just enjoy this moments.
it's
Because
a trip. It is such a trip.
yeah, because sometimes with my little one, who is 17 months, when I see some things he's doing, I'll be like, oh, my 20-year-old, I'll be like, oh, you used to do like this is how you used to do. So it's like I'm reliving all that again.
Oh yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's true, huh?
So let's enjoy every moment, be content with what we have, even though sometimes we haven't achieved those things. So a lot of us who are very ambitious, go, 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 we want it right now. Why are we not getting, sometimes we just have to chill. It's not
Yeah.
it's not being that you're complacent, like you said, but it's just like, what, be
Enjoy what you
patient,
have.
enjoy what you have right now. So I love that. Yeah, I kind of walk in that mantra level too, like, be content with what you have, mindset of gratitude, you know.
Yep,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Okay. So I want us to go into this next thing. I want to really want to know about you, Kaylee. I want you to share with us what you feel like has made you to be this woman you are today. Is it from your career, from childhood, your motherhood, work? Just share it as much as you can.
That's a complex question.
Yes, the floor
That's
is
all.
yours.
Yeah. I think a lot of it comes from my upbringing and my faith. I come from a family of 7 kids, second oldest, and so that instilled a lot of responsibility and work ethic and um, nurturing, and that led me to become a nurse in large part. I felt really divinely led to become a nurse. Um, and I became a nurse at 19, and I then was a missionary for 18 months. I was in El Salvador and Belize, and then I spent a semester for my bachelor's in the Middle East, and I lived in Jerusalem for 4 months, and I went to Palestinian neighborhoods, and that gave me a whole new perspective on life as well. When I came back, I went straight into an ICU in Salt Lake City, Utah, and I didn't realize how unique that ICU was, but I remember feeling very unqualified to work there because I'd had my license for 2 years as a nurse, but had never used it in an American hospital.
Oh, wow.
So they were interviewing me and looking through my resume, and they're like, wait a minute, you are not qualified to be here. And all I could say was, I love Jesus and I speak Spanish, so let me work here. And they went with it. They like actually let me treat patients. So that's scary, one. And two, they take in new people because their approach to critical care medicine is so different. And so in that interview and being on that unit, I just remember feeling this immense peace. Going in, I was terrified. But once I was there, it felt like home. And I knew I was supposed to work there. And now looking back, this is like 13 years later, so much of my life hinged on that moment in that interview. I worked in the ICU for 2 years, and the unique thing about that ICU is they allow almost every patient to wake up after they get the breathing tube placed.
Mm.
And no one told me how significant that was. It was just routine. It was like, of course, they're a human. Of course, they're going to be awake during the day, sleep at night, walk around unless something stops them from walking, right? But it was just routine. So great. I did that for 2 years, was loving my career, wanted new experiences, became a travel nurse, went to different parts of the United States. Every 3 months, I was moving around. But my very first contract in an outside hospital, that was my first time outside of my quote home ICU, it was totally different. Every single patient on a breathing machine was deeply sedated into a medically induced coma, which was weird to me. And I'd ask, why is my patient sedated? And they'd say, well, because they're intubated or because they have a breathing tube. And it felt weird to me. And I said, because it didn't make sense. I'm like, I've had so many patients on breathing tubes be awake and moving. So again, okay, I know that they have a breathing tube, but why are they sedated? And they say, because they're intubated. I say, why are they sedated? And that's when I realized that I was very alone in my perspective. And unfortunately, because I was so new, I was still only 2 years into my career, I just kind of went with what was normal in all the other ICUs. So I did that for a few years, hopped around, treated patients how everyone else treats them. Then I was very distinctly divinely led to go back to Salt Lake to get my doctorate. And I wasn't done being a nurse. I wasn't burnt out on bedside nursing. I liked the intimate moments with my patients. I didn't really know if I wanted to work as a nurse practitioner, but it was one of those things that's a whole nother story, but it was like, you're going to grad school. So I went. And so I was 27 at that point, met my husband at CrossFit. Took me 6 months to give him my number because I had him all figured out because he was a guy at CrossFit trying to pick someone up. And I was like, not about it. So continued on. Later on, we actually started to know each other, got married. I was doing grad school, and I still kept on feeling this gnawing, like this calling as I was back in that home ICU. So during grad school, I went back to the very first ICU, back to treating patients that are awake and walking on the ventilator. And I had so many questions because I was seeing that they were walking out the doors and discharging home. Whereas all the other ICUs, they were so deconditioned, so confused. They did poorly. They died at higher rates. I just saw this huge contrast. And so as I started reading the research, God kept saying that my calling was to disseminate that information, what that ICU did. And I had no idea what that meant. And it totally overwhelmed me. And I just pushed it in the back of my mind. I had my first child while I was in my last year of graduate school. And that was, again, not in my plan, but she was knocking on the doors as soon as we got married. And it was one of those things where you just couldn't deny it. Someone wanted to come. And I didn't know how that was all going to work together, right? Who has a kid during grad school? But maybe it's more common now than it was. You did? Oh, good. So I'm in good company. Good. Gabby had a kid during grad school, right? And anyway, started working the ICU as a nurse practitioner 2 years later. I was driving my car one day, and it's almost like I heard a voice. It was so distinct. Start a podcast. And I didn't even listen to podcasts. I didn't even really know what they were. This is 2019, December of 2019. And I almost said out loud, what? And it came again, start a podcast. And it was just so clear. And I'm like, okay, I guess I'm starting a podcast. And I didn't know how. And I'd wake up in the morning and I'd have to grab a pen and paper because I would have such distinct impressions. I'd have to write down the topics, the order, the specific episodes. And it came with this like almost manic drive to do like 32 episodes by March, at the beginning of March. Now I got this impression in December, started recording in January, and I had to do 32 episodes by the beginning of March. What sense does that make? I knew that was insane and not how podcasts work. But I couldn't sleep. I couldn't shake it. So I did it. survivors came out of the woodwork. I interviewed clinicians, researchers, and boom, put out these 32 episodes. And I just want to wash my hands of it and say, can I sleep now? Right. Then COVID hit. And I even thought to myself, well, now it's all about COVID. No one's going to care about this podcast. And it's like God took me by the shoulders and said, don't you understand? Millions of people are going to be on ventilators. This podcast is for COVID. So I continued that podcast the next couple of years, but I continued to have children. And so I had my first, and then 18 months later, I had my second. And 4 months after she was born, we started to notice that she was missing her developmental milestones, that her head control wasn't improving, that she was fatiguing really quickly. And we started doing all this testing, checking genetics, everything was coming out normal, but something wasn't right. And then COVID hit and everything shut down. So at some point during COVID, I was pregnant with my third, which was another step of faith. It was like, don't know what's going on with my second. Is this genetic? And just couldn't deny there was another spirit coming. It was just one of those things where you're just buckled up along for the ride. So COVID hit and there were no resources available for my daughter. We were doing one Zoom appointment over FaceTime or Zoom a week, as I have this like almost limp 16-month-old in my hands. It was really hard to get into neurology. Like everything was hard. And so felt very distinct pressure to move to Spokane, Washington, where my family is from, where my parents are. But that would mean leaving that ICU. And I'd started this podcast all about that ICU and what we do there. And it was during COVID and it was really hard. But we moved up there. I had my son like a week after we found a house and kept going on my podcast. I would almost give up. But then people would find me. ICU survivors would find me and say, because of your podcast, I know what I had. I know I had ICU delirium. It makes more sense. And I just almost felt like a spectator in this podcast journey. And it was amazing how many clinicians were starting to apply those things that I was teaching on the podcast to their COVID patients. And it was changing their outcomes and they were surviving and they were doing better. So this movement was happening. And then felt like I needed to have another child. So I had my fourth kid. And then the podcast kind of turned into consulting, teaching ICU teams how to change how they care for patients in the ICU in general, especially mechanical ventilation. And then I had families during COVID reaching out to me saying, my wife, my husband, my mom, they're in the ICU. What do I do? And I would kind of help them advocate for their loved ones and it would change their outcomes. And so how do I not keep those doors open or, try to help more families? And so you're asking, how did I become the woman I am today? It's been a mix of all these things, really, really hard journeys. It's really hard to not know what's going on with your kid and then to continue to have children. So tests of faith all the time. And now, 5 years later, I see it. Like it makes sense. My daughter was diagnosed with a genetic condition, a spontaneous happening genetic condition. So it wasn't inherited. So my other two weren't going to have the same condition, but I didn't know that. So fortunately, that's how it worked out. But she has a mitochondrial disease. And they explained it to me that she was 2.5 years old when we finally got this diagnosis. We were doing therapies. We were trying all these things. She was admitted to the hospital 5 times within 7 months during COVID. And then I would still feel like I was supposed to keep this podcast going. It was just there were so many moments I just wanted to like quit everything and just give up. But when we got this diagnosis, finally, it was mitochondrial disease that causes a lethal encephalopathy, meaning that it's anticipated that her brain will fail and she will die. And they said the life expectancy is very short. Most kids die in infancy. Well, she was 2.5 at that point. They're supposed to have seizures and cognitive impairments, and she doesn't have those. But that was such a hard blow to hear that this is a progressive disease. It's going to get worse. She's going to decline. She's going to die very young. And you have to know my daughter, like she's there. She's cognitively there. She's such a joy. She's like the center of our world. Her siblings love her, depend on her, need her. So it was just, I don't even know how to explain what a trip that was. And then during ICU admissions, before we even had a diagnosis, they wanted us to talk to palliative care. And now we just kept going day by day, just take it one day at a time. She's thriving. She has a feeding tube, which has really helped her. She's in preschool. She uses a computer to communicate with her eyes, and she is smart. She's so smart and funny. And all my kids are healthy. They're doing well. They all play together. It's just been miraculous. And now I get to live this dream career that I never could have even imagined 4 years ago. I remember I interviewed in an ICU here in Spokane, Washington. Before COVID happened, I wanted to move my family up here. So they flew me up for an interview, and I was sitting there and I just knew I couldn't just fit into other ICUs knowing what I knew. So I said, the greatest value I can bring to your team is to change how you treat patients, to help you avoid medically induced comas and get patients walking. And they said, you can't do that. You can't walk patients on ventilators. And I'm like, well, I've only done it for 7 years with hundreds, if not thousands of patients. So I don't know how to approach that. Anyways, I just remember walking away being like, if only they could just bring me in just to teach them how to do this and train their teams. But now that's what I get to do with teams all over the country. And I get to support families throughout that process. So it's been this incredible journey. My faith has grown. My character has grown. I still have moments of breaking points where I'm like, whoa, what is this? Is so much. This is such a heavy calling, but it's growing and people are helping and the movement is progressing and it's been incredibly fulfilling. So though I have this gnawing drive and ambition to really overhaul all of critical care and do all these crazy things with my family and just live life to the fullest, I also am learning that in whatever state I am therewith to be content in that day, in that moment, and come what may and love it.
Wow, that's amazing. I mean, I'm just looking at all the all the puzzles, putting all them together, you know. I mean, that's how I feel like your life has been. Like you have all these puzzles everywhere and you're just kind of fitting them in. And I mean, you guys listening to Kali's story is amazing because, you know, going through what gone through, having a child, young child telling you that, we don't know how long they'll live with a rare disease like this. I know how many people will give up on doing anything else. But somehow, God has kind of preserved you and kept you that, you are doing this work. He's making it possible for you, and I always share this. I'm a woman of faith, and I believe that there are many things that, we have that heart to do something and we do it. God is going to give us strength to keep moving on. We just have to say, God, use me as you want me, how you want me to do this. If this is what you want me to do, I have no energy right now. I don't feel like it. I have no zeal, but you know what is best for me. And somehow he leads us and helps us through this process. And this is what I see in your story.
There's no other explanation. To me, there's no other explanation.
Yes.
People will ask, when I'm on medical podcasts or presentations, they'll say, how did you even start this podcast? And I have to tell the truth. I'm like, I don't feel like I did. I just said, okay, so what do I do? And he led me through it.
Yes. It's like an out of body experience,
Absolutely.
It's like,
and it's just like, he's like, I'm just collecting puzzle pieces. And I still feel like I'm just collecting puzzle pieces because there's a lot I didn't know. There's, if 2 years ago, I would not have been prepared to show up to another ICU and just train them.
Yeah.
So it's been a long orientation process, and I still feel like I'm in training for whatever I'm doing.
And it's the power of what we speak, because you said that you've manifested it, many years when you were doing that interview. So word has power. That's why we have to be careful what we say.
Absolutely. With that, I mean, when I had my first during grad school, I was like, this is going to be insane. God, I need a baby that is independent. I can't have a really colicky baby that's needing me all the time. Yeah. And she's so independent that at 6 weeks old, she was done nursing. She was like, nope, hand me my bottle. I got this. And she wouldn't let us cuddle her. I wondered if she had some neurodivergence. No, she's pretty normal. She just really needed to be independent.
You're talking about your first one?
My first one. Yep. And so when it came to my second, we were like, well, yes, she was very independent, but we kind of missed out on the snuggles and the sweet baby. So
Yes.
can we have snuggles and brown eyes? And that's now my second. She has no choice but to be snuggly. And but she
Like,
enjoys snuggles, right? Like, but so we've gotten a lot of that from her. So it's just interesting. We
mhm.
consciously asked for those things, and that's exactly what we received.
Yes, you give sleep. Yeah. Yeah, well, words has power, and and this is something too that um going through in my Christian faith, some of the things that I desire to do. And I feel like it's such a big mountain. Like, how am I going to do this? I do journaling, which is something I need to resume because journaling is so helpful. You know, write all these things that this is what I desire to do. And this is something I encourage all of us to do. Write all those things you really want, and it might be like it's a want, it's not a need, but have this conversation. I do this conversation with God. I'm like, this is what I desire, this is what I want. If you think it's good for me, you're gonna give it to me. And why I say writing it down, because when those things come to be
Fruition.
yes, you can go back and see like, oh, I actually asked for this. You have it documented, because we forget. We have a lot of stuff to put in this our brain. And that's why it's good to write stuff down and say this.
Yes.
Yes.
That
My
letter
prayer
to Santa
points.
actually happened.
And go back. And also that helps too, that when you are going through difficult times and you feel like, okay, it looks like I can't get out of this funk or whatever you're going through. Sometimes going back to see those things that has happened, that was positive outcomes, gives you hope that if I could go through that, what I'm trying to get now is not even as worse as that, and I got that. God have made that happen to me, and so I just probably need to be patient, or maybe it is not meant to be. So this is the power of putting stuff down in your notes. It can be a physical book. I have a lot of stuff on my phone, special notes, and now that's with the Apple, it's this thing, you can pin your notes to know which one is. So
You can organize yourself.
yeah, so this is a way, to kind of remember that, look, and that, this is a way of also being grateful. And that's why I talk about journaling. You'll be able to tell what things are you have that you think you don't have. you know so
Right. And
yeah,
those trials can be blessings. It's all preparation for something bigger.
exactly.
I say bigger, I'm trying not to think harder, right?
Yeah.
He's like, oh, you cleared level 3, now it's time for level 4. And I'm like, no, I didn't mean that. I meant
Exactly. It's like, somebody actually shared that sometimes we go through this level and it's like, yes, level 3 now, unlock level 4. Now you
like,
go
no.
and fly, like, okay,
But
now
we
you
pray
are.
that, give me strength, give me
Yes.
resilience, all these attributes.
Mhm.
He's like, all right, I will, but it's going to require some experience.
Yeah.
There's a process of developing those attributes.
Yes.
And it's
And
not
that's,
always easy.
yeah, and that's what will keep you. There's this song, is it Kelly Clarkson, the popular song? Is like, what doesn't
Kill you makes you
makes
stronger.
you stronger? Yeah. That's the thing that sometimes we pray about when we're going through difficult times and we're like, God, take this out of me, I don't want this. But sometimes it's to ask God, like, this situation, if it cannot be taken away, give me the strength so I could walk through this. Because sometimes now, I mean, later on, and you will see that there was a reason why that happened, because now you're successful with that phase you are in your life. You'll be like, if that didn't happen, I wouldn't have been able to do this. And or you might see that if God had given you that thing you have been asking for many years ago, you would have really messed it up. You wouldn't be able to handle it.
Oh, yes.
So
100%. Yes.
yeah, you
I've
realize,
been very impatient with this whole
yes.
process. I'm like, just let me get in there. Let me just show them how it's done. We just got to, people are dying right now. We need to go fix this, And he's
Yeah.
like, you are not ready for that. You don't
Mm-mm.
understand so much about the culture. You don't know how to talk to people. You don't know how to work with the
Yes.
clinicians. You're just going to offend them
Yes.
and it will be counterproductive. So it's been a journey, and it's just my own personal
Mm.
growth, not just professionally, but just faith wise. And I'm very impatient, and my
Mm.
daughter just makes us actually physically stop and just savor every moment, and that's not my natural inclination.
Mm-hmm.
So in so many ways, she's a gift, but that's a hard thing for me to do, but she mandates it, and it's one of the best parts of my life right now.
Yes, because you will, it's kind of help you through to even be this better consultant you are, it's
I think
linked.
so.
Yeah, you know.
And then actually being a family member in the ICU, I how
Mm-hmm.
else would I have had that perspective and been able to help families? I've worked with
Having that
families, but I'm
empathy, because
yes,
now you can, I mean, I know sometimes like, okay, why did God choose me to do this? But now it's like you have this your child that the attention, you know how it can feel. So you can really emphasize, I can't even say the word,
empathize. Yeah.
empathize with other family members. And I don't know, when sometimes you talk with the family members, do you ever have to share the story that you have a kid that is does that come up?
Sometimes.
Okay.
Yeah, just to say,
Mm.
um, from the family position, which I can
Yes.
understand, in
Mhm.
my experience, absolutely. And I
Yeah.
had a good experience in the ICU,
Yes.
but it's nice to be able to say I haven't been a patient in the ICU, but I've been a patient elsewhere, right? So I've
Mhm.
been almost in all sides of the bed.
Yes.
And those weren't always fun experiences,
Mhm.
but now I'm grateful for them.
Yes. And that is powerful too, because sometimes when we're trying to help people, when we're talking to them, having a story that you have seen it, you have been in it, kind of, it helps them to give a better perspective or feel more comfortable, because sometimes it's not you're sharing something to somebody. It might be that, yeah, it's easy for you because you don't know,
Yes.
or this is textbook or research, but do you know? But having a story like this is something you know
And yeah, and
Mhm.
an example of that is I had just horrific, terrifying, debilitating postpartum anxiety after I
Mm.
had my first, and just unexpected panic attacks. I'd never experienced anything like that beforehand. I
Mm.
don't remember a lot of the episodes. My husband would just find me in shambles, hardly coherent. The only real episode I remember is when I was catatonic.
Wow.
And I understood what he was saying to me and the questions he was asking. I had answers. I could not move my body.
Mm.
So that was really difficult, especially since I'd always been pretty mentally healthy and independent and just
Like, where did this
almost
come from?
limitless.
Mm.
And that was really hard. And I had to get on medication and like
Mm.
recalibrate and restabilize. And so then later I was working with a patient in the ICU, and not long after, um, she was there because she was on lots of benzodiazepines, like anti-anxiety meds and marijuana, and she just lay there so
Mm.
sedated and try to eat in bed that she was aspirating into her lungs. And that's why she was in the ICU, is because she had food in her lungs. And
Mm.
her everything was so weak that she needed a feeding tube. So I was there trying to tell her that one, she needed to have a feeding tube, and two, she would never be able to eat again if she kept taking all of these things all at once. And she got extremely defensive and said, "You obviously don't know what it's like to have anxiety. You don't understand." And in that moment, I realized I don't understand her journey and her experience, but I
Mm.
was able to share my own personal insight, and it changed the conversation eh, dramatically. And then she was accepting of a feeding tube and rehabilitation, and was open to different
Wow.
approaches to manage anxiety, which I still don't feel like I'm the expert on, but
Yes.
just her feeling like that I was a real person. I had real experiences that
Mhm.
in my own way, I've been in the trenches as well. I was oddly grateful for how painful that experience was. It's really
Mm.
hard.
Yeah. And that's the thing too, is it turning your pain into a message?
Mhm.
And I mean, when we are going through that pain, we cannot see anything else. But years to come, that pain will be something which might be useful for somebody else, and can change their lives. Yeah.
Absolutely. You just
So
never know.
you never know. There's always something to learn with each situation.
I deeply believe that.
Yeah. And this comes to the moment where I say, changing your lemons to sweet lemonade.
Absolutely.
I always have a time when I have to say this during the podcast, and this came to be.
The prime moment. No, that's
Yes. And I
one
would
of
say,
the themes of my life.
yeah, sweet lemonade, because some lemonades are too sour. So that's why.
And you know, when I'm working with teams in the ICU and there's a patient that's really sick and really difficult, and they're like, oh, that these, whatever you're teaching, whatever you're, trying to get us to do, that doesn't apply to this patient. I get excited. I think initially it was like, oh man, why don't we just get an easy patient to practice on, to demonstrate
Yeah.
on? But it's the hard patients when we can still use these principles, we can still humanize their care, we can still
Yes.
adapt these things, and it works. Then that just prepares them for the harder things to come. So with that, it's like something that would have been just perceived as a failure or not an
Yes.
option, to utilize those moments to take it head on, to cleave to what you know, the things you know you should be doing and can do. It makes the rest of your life, all the other aspects of your life, make more sense, be more manageable. You can
Yes.
navigate them better when you've really taken on the hard things.
Mm-hmm. And you have this like, yep, if we can do that with the hard one, then we can do anything.
Yep, they're like, anyone else is a breeze. Yep.
Yes.
And then you
Yeah.
have the tools, like they develop those tools and that expertise with the hard ones that they can then draw on with all the others.
Yes. That is amazing. I love this. Mm. So what would you say you are most proud of as a woman today?
That I keep trying, that that I keep my eye on my why.
Yes.
I mean, I just summarized a lot of, like, 33 years of a lot of really hard things, and I have a lot of self-doubt and imposter syndrome and frustrations, and I gave you the nice highlights,
Yeah.
but it's been really hard, to be honest. Just having 4 kids in less than 5 years, like, just a lot of really hard things.
Mhm.
So I think I'm just really proud that I wake up every day and keep trying. It's kind of as simple as that.
Yes.
Sometimes that's about as much as I can do.
Where there is life, there is hope.
Yep, and every new day is just a new
Mm.
opportunity,
Yeah.
and we're not gonna do it perfectly, and we're not gonna do everything we can or should do, but I
Yeah.
think God's okay with that.
Yes. It's not to give up. We keep trying. As long as we're still breathing, as to say, as long as you're still breathing, you have all these people, those little people that depend on
Uh-huh.
mama, taking care of yourself, because, a healthy mama gives you healthy kids most of the time. um, some of the things we do now, we are, of course, we still want to have our own me time. Something, it can be overwhelming. I know that's the thing. Some moms can feel guilty that, they have these feelings like, oh, why am I feeling this way? Because of course, a lot of us, we think about this thing. What if I had only one kid? Maybe I should have been fine. What if I had stopped having?
Yeah.
How would my life be and all that? But again, um, it's okay to have those feelings sometimes. It's just when the feelings get too chronic and
And then we lose sight of the good things that we
of the
have.
good. Yes,
Yeah.
that's right. So yeah, we keep trying. I love that. And so what would be some of the encouraging words you want to give to anyone listening today as we round up this podcast today?
Just focus on your own journey. I think comparison is the theft of joy. And so just be patient where you're at. Celebrate your own personal victories, no matter how big or how small. They definitely count. And so just focus on your own why, your own mission, your own passions, your own gifts.
Yes.
We're all so different and we need each other's nuances. And so don't compare yourself to others. Celebrate your own progress and journey, and yeah, find joy along the way.
Yes, that's right. I agree with that. So you guys are listening and making notes. I hope you're making notes of this. You can go back anyway. You can listen to this podcast all the time, rewind, pause, all that. Yeah. So how can people connect with you, Kaylee?
My website is
Mhm.
www.daytonicuconsulting.com. I have there under the tab for resources, there's the clinician podcast. There's also a family podcast called
Yeah.
Walking You Through the ICU. And I think that's a great resource for the layman, people that do not work in the ICU. It's not super technical, but it gives a pretty succinct breakdown of what's going on in the ICU. I think it's important for people, even if they're not facing critical illness in that moment with themselves or loved one, to understand what's happening, how to develop your own advanced directive to make sure that you're protected against some of these cultural and harmful practices that are happening. So I'm happy to obviously help any families out there, anyone that has questions, any ICU team that needs help. I'm happy to, again, move this mission and this message forward to whoever needs it at the time. I just feel like I've collected all this information. I have all these tools that I'm just desperate to get out to the world because people are always in the ICU. They're always in need of this help.
Yes, that is amazing. Yeah, so all these things, I'll be having them under the description notes because it's going to be on YouTube and anywhere you listen to podcasts. So make sure you guys check it out. I think this is a very important thing for all of us to know, because I know this is one area it's not very common to find resources like this.
No, I'm pretty much the only one really going out of the limb with the target on my forehead, but I'm okay with that. And that's been part of my journey too, is accepting the risk, and it's come with so many benefits, and it really has saved lives. So
yes, that's the thing, saving lives. Yeah. So this is really good. I love it, and praying that you keep doing this because this is something that we really need in this area. So I'm glad you're doing this.
and thank you for the opportunity to share it, and for your great podcast, for caring about women and the big picture of our lives. We get so siloed in how we approach lives or what parts of our lives that we share.
Yes.
But I feel like what I do professionally is so much because of my faith and my family and all my life experiences. And I think most of us can relate to that. And so thanks for providing a safe place to tie it all in together.
Yes, I'm glad you thank you. Thank you too for coming today. I so really appreciate you.
Thank you.
All right, people. This comes to the end of the Gaby U Show podcast today. And I like to end this podcast with my favorite quote from Maya Angelou that says, "When you know better, you do better." Thank you, Kelly, again. And I will see you guys next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you.